Welcome to another episode of Dad Bods with Bad Attitudes. And today I got myself, Mark Davis, and a different guest is with me today. We have Jan Birkmann. Jan, how are you doing?
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
You bet, you bet. So, Jan, this is kind of the first time that you and I have, spoken face to face. We've been communicating a lot back and forth on threads. I think about 5 or 6 months ago is when I really started just going crazy on threads and firing off. And I think about that same time frame as when me and you crossed paths, and you were seeing the fight that I was fighting here in America, and I saw some pretty interesting posts of you with like eagles and birds of, Germany kind of showing America that you are entering this fascist time period, and like Jan is going to help guide us through it. So kind of talk about what got you to blast off on threads, and what got you interested in politics here.
Yeah, guidance is some high praise. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think the first time I noticed you doing what you do, even before you started running for Congress, was like I made this one video out in the city at the cathedral that we have, this 1,000 years old building that also went through the Second World War. This video that where I felt incredibly socially awkward talking about the situation in the US when it began to dawn on me where things are going for you all over there. Based on our own historical experience. And then I posted that, and I don't know, somehow that ended up on your timeline, and then I opened my notifications at some point, and then I said, why is this guy making a video and answering me? So this was something this hadn't happened to me before. That was interesting. And before that point, I was mostly doing cartoons. You mentioned it, with the eagles. It so happens that our national animal is also an eagle. It's a little bit of a smaller one than the one you have. But I thought, well, I have some form of artistic talent. What am I going to do with that? I have to do something. There's just no way I'm going to sit still. So yeah, I started making messages, drawing messages, anti-fascist messages directed at a US audience. And yeah, when I felt that didn't suffice anymore, this videos and several other videos happened, and that's how we met.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been helpful for me anyway, to be able to see your post and see that you care, about America, and that you see that it's coming. And it was almost just a sigh of relief for me that somebody else outside of my bubble is seeing what's going on. And I'm going to risk myself sounding kind of silly here, but I just caught on probably within the past 6 or 7 months that like we're in this shit moment, and I was kind of asleep before that. And I've told many times people that after Trump got elected the second time that I was just going to ignore it and just tune it out, and I wasn't even going to pay attention, and that didn't last very long,
Yeah, I
so
think you mentioned that in your first podcast. I
yeah.
think this kind of it's somewhat. I'm not gonna say normal, because nothing about this is normal in any way whatsoever. But the journey of realizing this is different for every single person, and you got around it earlier than some others. It's not like every single person here, or myself even, have from the moment on he was back in office realized this is going to turn full fascist. Like this took a month or two even for us
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. Like, did you see patterns like far before the election, or were you kind of like me, where you kind of just kind of waited? Where is this going to go? This guy's a little unhinged, but where is it going to go? And then he just drops some bombs, and then you're just like, fuck.
Yeah, well, we already more or less hated that guy already. I mean, now it's we too wake up every day and ask, what the fuck has he done now? But that was even the case when he was in office the first time. But then it was more of a general way of thinking, like, yeah, but he's going to be gone at some point, and he's an idiot. That's what idiots do. Maybe it's a phase. And I remember there was an election party here at my university in the Faculty for Politics, where we had a lot of discussion right before the elections took place, and we went through Project 25 as well. I remember like the goosebumps that some of us had in this discussion with the professors from the department. about this Project 25 because it was obvious to us that, I mean, Trump distanced himself from this Project 25 of the Heritage Foundation. But it's
Hmm.
obvious that it was the playbook, going to be the playbook. But this was somewhat surreal for most of us. We were outright calling it a alt-right, far-right agenda, but we didn't think it could actually. This wouldn't happen. That's something the Americans are. No, they're smarter than that. That's what we thought. And the next day I woke up, checked my phone, and then I placed it down. And was like, no, please no. And then it was like 2 months. And for me personally, and I think for a lot of other fellow Germans of mine, the turning moment was when he met Zelensky in the White House,
Yeah.
because I was just taking a stroll through the city, just getting some fresh air. And then I heard that someone mentioned it to me in the chat, and I put out the live stream, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And that was the moment I realized something had fundamentally changed. Treating the president of a country at war that is being attacked like that was something fundamentally different. And I think since then, most other people have realized. I was looking up some figures on polls here in Germany on the perception of the US. It's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been so let me kind of start over. You're in Germany, right? And so let's just throw out the word so people are comfortable with it, right? Nazi, fascist. You're in Germany, and your
Mm.
country dealt with Nazis, and you dealt with fascism movement, right? And you, Jan, you are a thinking man, right? You are a sociologist, right? Or you're training to become a sociologist. Can you kind of speak on that a little bit? That you're not just, just a random German citizen. You are actually a student of thinking.
Yes, so I did my bachelor's in social sciences here in Aachen at the RWTH University, which is actually a technical university not well known for social sciences, but it exists. And now in my master's, I study sociology, and I mostly focus on political sociology. I have also worked in politics briefly and in German administration, which was an interesting time to be sure. So there's that, and of course I do the artist stuff on Threads right now. But there's also a more personal connection to this because my own family, I mean, as is the case for most people here, were fascists and Nazis. My great grandfather was a member of the SS. My grandfather fought in the war when he was just 16,
Hmm.
goes away. And when you grow up here, you do not simply grow up in an education system that teaches you intensely year after year how this happened and what happened in the Second World War. You have the remnants of the war in front of you every single day.
Yeah.
Doesn't I mean, especially here in Western Germany, Aachen is the westernmost largest city in Germany, right at the border to the Netherlands and Belgium. It's buildings, it's like memorials. You have that in front of you every single day. And sometimes, as is the case for our big cathedral, they have left the damages from the Second World War this way. It's like you can't exactly avoid it here. I think our culture of remembrance is something that permeates our culture and that we are somewhat known for these days. So it's not exactly possible to separate it and put it down into technical terms. I study this kind of stuff. It's inherently personal. It goes directly under my skin with my personal heritage. So long story short, I study this, but it wasn't clear technical scientific terms that led me to this urge to do something with art on Threads and social media. It's kind of the same thing that you do. You just instinctively know this is wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can of course go to the scientific, technical details of that, but I think there's also something that I've been trying to tell people on Threads. Trust your gut, because this is the first line of defense against fascism that you have. You know this is not right, and especially considering since some people in the US still haven't woken up to this.
So it's interesting because, I try to notice fascism more and more, and I try to point it out, and I try to post about it, and I try to make fun of it, and I try to everything I can to show that it's not normal, right? And I would love for somebody to do something like some sort of good trouble out there, whether it's like dump a dump truck of shit on Ron DeSantis's driveway or something out there, so people have something to look at and just say, hey, this shit isn't normal. But something else that isn't normal, in my opinion, are very public people in America that have such important and strong followings and such capital that they're able to say things that Americans may or may not completely understand, but then they go with them. And And what I'm talking about specifically is Elon Musk, okay? And he's been saying a lot of things about the AfD. And I know just a little bit about the AfD, just like the very, very basics about the AfD. And from my dumb American viewpoint, the AfD to me is the far right movement in Germany that may have some Nazi tendencies, right? People would argue that they're not Nazis and they're probably not Nazis, but I feel like they might have some of that Nazi value there. But then when people like Elon Musk throw that into the mainstream, all of a sudden AfD, that abbreviation becomes normal. It's like, okay, it's okay. It just rolls off your tongue now. Like it's a normal thing. So just kind of talk to me a little bit about what's going on here. So I think we're gonna end here with Elon Musk. Like what's he really getting to, and what's his main thing? But maybe give us a little bit of a history about AfD, why it started in Germany, and where you think it's going.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, AfD stands for Alternative für Deutschland, who are right now the primary far right party. They call themselves Alternative for Germany, presenting themselves as this kind of somewhat like Trump actually when he ran for office the first time. We do away with like the swamp. We're gonna do this differently. A touch of revolution, perhaps. This sums it up for the most part pretty well. The AfD dates hasn't been a thing for the most time in German politics. For the most time, there wasn't really a far right party here. We were somewhat of an
Hmm.
exception internationally. It wasn't really a thing. The AfD really became a thing during the refugee crisis in 2014-15,
Okay.
following up on the not exactly the Arab Spring, but the civil war in Syria, which saw countless refugees entering Europe. And it was a convoluted crisis of a failed European system that was supposed to distribute refugees equally, and yeah, well, then national egoism kicked in. And this kind of sense of we're getting overwhelmed with all the people that Angela Merkel decided we would take in
Hmm.
as a humanitarian move. This kind of sense that why is this happening? We're getting overwhelmed. That really kicked off the AfD. Before that point, people just laughed at them like they're not to be taken seriously. Before that, they even didn't really do much far right stuff. They were more focused on like, why is Germany in the European Union? We want national control back. A little bit Brexit vibes going on there.
Hmm.
We want our own currency back. Why do we have the euro? Then the refugee crisis came and they went full far right
Interesting.
pretty fast, especially in the former DDR territory in Eastern Germany,
Hmm.
which happens to be an area that is to this day underdeveloped somewhat in terms of infrastructure, for example.
Hmm.
So a lot of political people who were politically frustrated with the
Okay,
status
so
quo.
Germany took in these refugees, right?
Mhm.
And the AfD was upset and thought they were being overwhelmed. Maybe just kind of speak a little bit about why they felt that way. Like, were these refugees taking their jobs, or what was the underlying reason that the AfD was so upset?
Yeah, I've been going into it with a little bit more in detail because there you start to see the parallels to what's happening in the US pretty fast. What you mentioned, like the refugees are taking our jobs, it's somewhat the same story that MAGA is telling in the US about, I don't know, immigrants. It's exactly the same story
Hmm.
that the AfD started to work with as well. That wasn't the case. To this day, I think most of the people who arrived back then are actually in work, and we desperately need migration actually to bolster our economy. But that wasn't of much interest to these people. I believe it was. There's also some scientific research on this. It was a lot of people, especially not only but especially in Eastern Germany, who felt like left behind by the system, who came out like a few decades prior from a socialist and dictatorship and hadn't really been properly integrated into the country. And then there came the refugees, and why are they getting so much better treatment than us? That's kind of the sentiment that stuck around then.
Hmm.
And that was a big bolster for the AfD. Funny enough, there's a famous quote by an AfD politician who's not active anymore, I think, who was quoted with saying, "The worse Germany is off, the better for the AfD." And
Hmm.
every time there's a crisis, and there have been lots of crises since the COVID crisis was just another bolster, every time something disruptive happens where people feel like overwhelmed or with globalization, feel out of control, AfD thrives.
Yeah,
This is
it's
basically
interesting
a
that
MAGA playbook.
yeah, once you start challenging those groups with facts, how quickly their stories crumble. I don't know what it's like necessarily in Germany with the refugees, but here with the immigrants in America that, they do contribute to our economy. They do pay taxes. They do, so it's even the quote unquote illegal immigrants that they like to call them here in America. They are for the most part the ones that are employed. They are paying taxes and they are a benefit to our society. It's more of a label that they slapped on them being illegal rather than undocumented. So yeah, I don't know what it's like in Germany if those folks are if
For
they're
the most
being
part, they are.
categorized as, yeah.
For the most part, they are contributing to society. It's not like we don't have any issues because
Hmm.
obviously there's cultural differences. But it's nothing that's unsolvable. The AfD, however, needs to portray these issues as unsolvable. Divide et impera. It is a MAGA playbook. Goes away to show how fascist far-right tendencies go down to very simple emotional phenomena that you can play with humans, doesn't matter in what country. So that's the history of it
Yeah.
all. You mentioned Elon Musk. I believe it was even this year when we had federal elections. So our government happened
Well,
to
okay,
break.
but before we get into Musk 100%, just because I just want to kind of set the stage, right? Because a lot of people here in America and Germans say that the AfD has echoes of Nazi Germany in it. So kind of maybe we talked about, how it became, but like talk about what's actually inside that group and what may worry you a little bit that they may themselves be turning a little fascist.
Yeah, I was just getting to that exactly. So as I said, the AfD started off as somewhat of an academic heavy party, Eurosceptic, and then came the refugee crisis, and they began to take in large quantities of people who were basically far right. Then they
Hmm.
stayed like that. There's a long-standing debate on what do you do with the AfD. Are they really that dangerous here as well? And well, the history of the AfD, since especially the refugee crisis, is one of self-radicalization. Every time they elected new chairpersons who became the face of the party, some other person came along, got them out, took the place, and became even more radical. This is basically how it's been going ever since. Right now we have Alice Weidel, who's also been in contact with Elon Musk, and the AfD is right now the cesspool of far right to almost fascism here in Germany, unfortunately.
Hmm.
There are some other minor parties, they don't matter all that much. There's also people in the AfD who are probably not far right themselves, who are mainly extremely frustrated, but well, they go along with the bullshit anyway.
Hmm.
And so Nazism is perhaps not the right word right now because it's a very distinct ideology.
Hmm.
This is also why I don't call MAGA Nazis. They're fascists, but that's technical terms.
Yep.
Yeah, and since we don't really have a counterbalance, a progressive party with ideas, a vision for the future, they managed to go through
Hmm.
with their populist agenda. So it's a bit convoluted. This debate on is it actually full on fascism? Do we actually oust? Because it's possible to oust a party from the political spectrum here. It's a complex procedure, but it's possible. Do we actually do that? That hasn't happened for ages.
Yeah.
It's yeah, but well, for my part, they're fascists.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say far right, basically they're lining up with our far right, where they're very anti-immigration, and then they make up statistics to worry people about crime and things like that, right? That
Exactly.
may or may not be necessarily true. So, yeah, that's
Though
interesting.
I would say MAGA is more extreme by now. Really, the US has got away like that. It's off the charts by now. Even for our context here. The AfD is perhaps one of the most extreme major political groups that you will find here in Central Europe. It's gotten to a point where even Marine Le Pen from France doesn't want to work with them anymore because she
Mm,
thinks she's like the far right figure from France, and she didn't even want to work with the AfD
wow,
anymore because
interesting.
it got that extreme. But even MAGA got more extreme than that. Yeah,
Huh.
That's where we
Yeah.
are at.
Interesting. Okay, so sorry I cut you off earlier on Elon Musk. I know you want to talk about him, but yeah, like I try to stay away from X, or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, because I think that it's just vile over there. The comments. I think it's just full of bots anyway. But I go
It
there
is.
just to look at Elon Musk's rhetoric, and I try
Condolences.
and I comment on Elon Musk stuff all the time because I'm like, dude, no, this you can't just say this stuff unimpeded, and that's why I wanted to bring you on and give you a chance to talk back to Elon Musk, Jan, and say, so he's talking about the AfD, and he's given all this support to the AfD, and he is meddling in your election, in my opinion, by this huge public support and all this different financial influence that this man has. So talk about that. Talk about what the heck is Elon Musk up to?
Stand that guy, honestly. I mean, it's an interesting story. Musk is actually not the only one who's meddling with our affairs right now, and he's definitely meddling with our affairs. I think the first time, I'm not quite sure, but the first time someone, a major political figure from the US, tried to interfere here, that wasn't even Musk, that was J.D. Vance, who alleged that our freedom of speech was endangered somewhat. And if I remember correctly, our Chancellor Merz rebutted that quite strongly, which was at that time unusual for him. So this is another little break in American relations right there. And during our federal elections earlier, just this year, 25, Musk chimed in to allege that the AfD supposedly was the only party capable of saving Germany. That's what he said.
Right.
Which was just another red flag if you have got your senses together. And then he proceeded to do this at the time much anticipated call with Alice Weidel, who's chairing the AfD. I believe it was even on X, and it was like a very embarrassing fan meet up. And Alice Weidel came mostly across as a fan of Elon Musk right there.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was strange, really. That was that for the time. We were not amused that he did that, and now he's doing it again. Because I mentioned it before the call, we have communal elections here in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is the federal state I happen to live in. Musk again apparently noticed that and chimed in and again came across with, the AfD is the only party that can save Germany. He's constantly doing it right
Jeez.
now.
So explain
It's
that again.
nuts.
So you just recently had an election, or you're about to have an election, or both?
Both. The federal
Okay.
elections for our federal government were earlier this year because,
Okay.
Olaf Scholz' government before that broke down due to a budget crisis. Along came Friedrich Merz with. Now we have a somewhat center-right government consisting of the Social Democrats and the Union, which is also the party of Angela Merkel, with Chancellor Friedrich Merz. And yeah, that was the federal elections earlier. And next Sunday, actually, this week, we will have communal local elections here in North Rhine-Westphalia in one single federal state, where we elect city councils on a local level, mayors and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I believe Musk is chiming in because we happen to be the most populous federal state of Germany. It's like 18 million people. It's also an industrial powerhouse, former coal mining region, densely
Okay.
populated. And apparently Musk is taking interest in that. So yeah, we had elections where he interfered and now he's doing it again.
So what do your leaders say about this? Because this isn't like me or you spouting off on Twitter or X. This is a man that has influence and he has ties to business and he can hurt people. He can fire people overnight and ruin people's lives. So I mean, what does your leadership say about this? What does your president? What does everybody say about this? What is the leadership of AfD? Do they care, or are they just riding the coattails?
If I remember correctly, I'm not quite sure, but there was a very embarrassing post by the leader of the Liberal Party, FDP, who tried to reach out to Musk saying, like, no, don't talk to them. They're basically far-right extremists. Talk to us. And that was embarrassing. And for the most part, however, our leadership is staying somewhat quiet on that. Like, you will, of
Yeah.
course, see statements from individual parliamentarians and politicians rebutting this, unless you're a member of the AfD. The AfD, of course, welcomes the publicity because then they can get into the victim role. No one wants to work with us together because here there's a consensus that you don't work together with the AfD. If another party so much as waves at the AfD, you can count on protests erupting the next day in the streets. So Musk is really lending some attention, which may or may not bolster the numbers. I haven't checked the numbers on that. But so far, which leads back to the larger picture, actually, our leadership is staying somewhat quiet on this. I believe it was brushed off as well. He can have that opinion. It may be wrong, but, well, why not? Musk also, before these elections, actually insulted our president, I believe, and our chancellor, and he tried to brush that off. Well, he can have opinion. Part of democracy is being able to voice opinion even if they're bullshit. The reason for that, I believe, is that no one wants to pick a fight with the US right now because we're still too dependent on you all for our
Yeah.
defense, especially considering that we have a war on our doorstep in Ukraine.
Well, I mean, I think that just shows how insane Musk's comments are, that he can get away with it, right? And he has so much power that even an entire country as powerful as Germany is afraid to say something, because they have so many financial ties to America, and
Yeah. I
it's
mean, I bet
interesting.
it's with gritted teeth. If you sit in a cafe with friends, then people will freak out about this and get angry and stuff. But otherwise, it stays somewhat quiet.
So talk
So
about, I mean, talk when I read Musk's post on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, it makes it sound like the AfD is the party in Germany. They are the rising star, that they are going to win, that they are the majority, that everybody is turning into the AfD. Is that the case? I mean, what's it like in Germany?
not quite. The AfD is now polling at like 25% head to head with the Union, Merz, and also, as I mentioned, Angela Merkel's party, which is new. That is actually new and quite concerning. That hasn't happened before. The AfD, that may be due to another booster in publicity during the COVID pandemic, which was rather disruptive. And yeah, the AfD since has moved to trying to pick culture fights, very similar to what Elon Musk does, transgender rights. And then we have a whole other debate, which is very particular to Germany because of our language. We assign gender to objects. We have different gender for chainsaw is female, for
Sure.
example, in Germany, but
Yeah.
woman or girl is actually gender neutral. And then the question of some people have pushed for like trying to make our language more gender equal, and this has been something that the AfD has been constantly mulling about. They want to get at our beautiful language, exactly the stuff that MAGA and Trump has done.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff that keeps them popular.
Well,
As long
it
as
seems like they picked the smallest issues to make the biggest culture wars out of,
exactly.
like trans rights, and then all of a sudden our whole political ship is being directed by these small issues that aren't real. So
Exactly. So that's what they do. They never provide solutions, and as long as no one actually places a countervision that gets people behind it, they are able to do that. So I wouldn't say, to answer your question, I wouldn't say that they're the party right now. Like if you're voting AfD, it has been more of a stigma than it is right now, but it's still like people will look at you and it's like, are you fucking stupid? That's the reaction that you will get from I would say decent people.
so to put a percent on it, you would say it has probably about 25% support in Germany.
Yeah, according to the latest poll, I just checked the polls today. I have them right here, actually.
Yeah.
It's something like 25%. It heads to head with the union. No other party comes close, but there's reason to believe that they have reached their full potential right now. At least
Yeah.
that's what I hope.
Yeah.
That it doesn't get any worse than that.
But it probably
And
doesn't help. It probably doesn't help when Elon Musk is out there with 200 and some 50 million followers saying all this crazy stuff. So there's two things I want out of you, Jan, before we leave here. And one more is, the first thing is, I want to give you a little bit of a platform here just to like, is there anything else that you want to tell Elon Musk, like, hey man, that's enough?
I remember this beautiful post from the last post from Elon Musk was actually like, if you don't vote for AfD, Germany is kaputt, and then I reposted that. I saw that because you reposted that, and
Yeah.
and all I had to say on that was, yeah, Elon is the one who's kaputt. Like people, like it's become a social stigma to own a Tesla here. Like that's people have been putting stickers on their Teslas. Like I bought that before he went crazy, and I just hope that guy goes bankrupt. I mean, that would be
Yeah.
one horrible guy less to worry about.
He's
This
he's
but
done he's done so much damage to his brand. Yeah. I couldn't imagine he's going to be the CEO much longer of Tesla. I couldn't imagine his sales are sinking. His
yeah,
company. I don't think they would even be profitable if it wasn't for the $7,500 EV tax credit that we have here.
yeah,
So a lot
yeah,
of a
but
lot of stuff like that. So, Jan, I want to say thank you for your time. It sounds like you guys have a little bit of a fight there with the AfD. It sounds like you guys have it under control. They're 25%. You just need to get Elon Musk to fucking stop talking about them, and then let's move on with life. But you did, Jan. You used to have a problem with fascists. You used to have a problem with Nazis, right? And the last thing I want out of you, Jan, is just some lessons for America or some advice for Americans. Your best shot at transferring a MAGA person over to the good side. So the stage is yours, brother.
I'll try to narrow it down because there's a whole lot to say that, and we would sit here for hours actually. The most important part that I tell people in the US is, and this is also the most powerful message that I've gotten out so far, is that I know, and many people here know, the struggle. It's not like you said we have it under control, barely. We have the AfD barely under control. We have a consensus that you don't work together with far-right parties, we don't work together with the AfD, and yet there have been people in some conservative, in the union, for example. Do we actually want to do this? Maybe we should. We can't avoid them forever. It's like faltering. We are perhaps not that far behind you, and it may become a real issue here as well. You are just very far down the road. But I know from our own history and from keeping an eye out for that, how difficult this is. And this is also why I tell people, don't give up hope. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, what else? There is... And the next thing that I always tell people, after I tell them, I know, but don't lose hope, is that I don't think many Americans realize this, but the resistance and the nests and pockets of resistance in America are much larger right now than any form of resistance ever was after the Nazis took over here in 1933. We didn't have this kind of... There weren't mass demonstrations. There was not a local governor who said, fuck you, I'm going to gerrymander my way into this myself. If you can do that, I can. That wasn't a thing. When Hitler got to power, it was basically over. The Constitution was dead. And America, you really have a shot at this right now. Another thing is it's going to get worse before it gets better. I mean, at the time of recording, Charlie Kirk was just assassinated. And I've seen political talk on threads about this, and that it may be like this Reichstagsfire event for you. It may not. I hope it's not going to be that.
Yeah,
but
that was interesting.
It's going to get worse, and then hopefully it's going to get better because you have a shot at this. But what matters is, and that may be a bit controversial, which is another thing, but what matters is getting people back from MAGA in sheer numbers. I know there's been families I've talked to people on threads, I know there's families who've been torn apart. I know people lost friends over this. You talked about online about your own family situation with this. This is something I know that gets people's blood boiling. But I know there's projects like Leaving MAGA, for example, who focus on doing just that, and they had some success with that. It's possible to get people back. And just for the sheer numbers, it's worth a shot. It's possible and it's worth a shot. And last but not least, something for the future. It's not that acute right now, but something for the future is, if there's to be a future after Trump, you will all have to find a way to deal with those people who haven't turned away from MAGA and who are still in this besides everything that has happened. Yep. And that's going to be a shit show of its own. I don't know how else to phrase that. People always think or imagine that, after Hitler was gone here, actually Aachen, the city I live in, was the first city to be captured by American forces in the Second World War. And people always think after the Second World War, that was that, and we turned into a democracy. But that took ages. That took generations to really come to a stable democracy. It was messy, it was very just shades of grey, nothing pure. Many Nazis got exonerated and were never punished for their crimes. And I believe it may or may not, something similar may happen in the US. But this is not to say, and this is the last point that I would like to make, this is not to say that it's going to be all this struggle, all this mess just for an even bigger mess and just a lot of moral questions. It will be difficult, but will also be your privilege. And if I may say, at that, for my part, I'm glad that there's people like you putting their head out for this and actually doing something about this. It needs more people like you.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate you, Jan. Keep posting, keep spreading your wonderful pictures. Oh, you have no idea how much that stuff helps for us. I'll keep promoting you. Is there anything else that you would like to say? I think that's pretty much everything I had. Just really Really appreciate you, Jan.
Yeah, thanks to you too, and I really appreciate that you took me onto this podcast because mostly I'm just sitting ducks here and I'm asking myself what I'm going to do. I wish I could be there actually
Yep.
and help you, but they wouldn't let me into this country anymore after what I've said online. They denied people entry for less. So
Is
I
that
really
right?
appreciate the opportunity a lot.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Have a great one. All right. Stay on for just a second here.